The act of exercising can be overwhelming. Like, oh, I'm going to be in the gym for an hour, and do I have time? And I'm going to get dressed and go to this place, and Well, what if you could just streamline all of that and just do one thing? Like, just focus on one thing. So, for instance,
I do want to start high level for the audience, because when it comes to taking a minimal approach to your health, there's one activity that you talk about in this book more than pretty much any other. And you rattle off some profound health benefits. And so I want to talk about this activity, because I think a lot of people are familiar with it, but may take it for granted. And so what is that powerful activity?
I think you're talking about the powerful activity called walking. Yeah, I'm a huge walker. I got a smartwatch about 6 years ago, and I started tracking my steps. And as I don't know if you have a smartwatch, but it's very addictive when you start tracking your steps and you see how much you're walking. And what I discovered was, just walking around my house, I was probably getting about 2,000 to 3,000 steps. And so when I started operating from Mexico City, it's a very big walking culture. And I noticed that I was able to easily get 8,000 to 10,000 steps without even trying. So then I became more intentional about doing the 10,000 steps a day. And now I'm probably up to like 15,000 steps a day. But yeah, it's been a life-changing, health-changing, everything-changing situation since I started walking. And that's where I became familiar with the term flaneuring.
What is that?
So flaneuring is this 18th century French term for aimless walking, which means basically walking without an objective, walking without a destination in mind. You're walking just for the sake of walking. And while you're walking, and they recommend that you flaneur in a sober state and by yourself, because you can get distracted when you're in conversation with other people or when you're under the influence of some substance. You're completely present. You're noticing things about the environment that you're walking through, and you download different insights and epiphanies and creative ideas and things like that. So essentially, it was walking meditation before walking meditation.
Whoa.
And and then there's obviously a lot of side effects, that are healthy side effects from walking, just in terms of joint mobility. I mean, the body is essentially designed for that. Is the primary exercise the body is designed for. So it helps with longevity. It helps with digestion. A lot of people suggest walking after you eat a meal, and there's so many benefits to walking.
Would you say that you're a fitness minimalist as well? I mean, like, do you try to take like a minimal effective dose approach to your health and fitness?
Yeah. Another thing that I talk about in here is, so I used to be a yoga teacher, right? And take a lot of yoga classes. And one thing that I did with Travel Light was, first of all, it's not a travel book. It's just a way of living in a lighter way, with less things. How do you check the major boxes such as exercise, meditation, walking, dressing? How do you check all those boxes in the minimal way? In other words, how do you do more with less? And so I distilled in terms of stretching, I distilled it down to just one thing, which is the resting squat. So sitting in a resting squat. And I recommend people do that on a daily basis, starting with as much as you can sit, 30 seconds. And a resting squat is where you just literally, feet separated a little bit wider than hips distance, and then just bending your knees and sitting into as deep of a squat as possible. If it's a full squat, then you're not using any muscle tension. But maybe that's too much for some people, so they have to put something underneath their heels and then sit, or they need to sit on a low platform or a chair or something like that, and then you work up to sitting for longer and longer, and then ultimately, hopefully, sitting for 5 minutes. So I started doing that a few years ago, and that was, I had all kinds of, I'm in my I just turned 50, so.
Happy birthday.
When I would squat, I could hear my knees, it sounded like Rice Krispie treats. They were snap, crackling, and popping. And now they don't do that anymore. There's nothing, I'm able to sit into it for about 10 minutes. and it's opened up my hips, it's opened up my hamstrings, it's opened a lot of things up, but it's just done from consistency. So
Wow.
there's that. And then exercise, I have been doing a minimalist workout where I do one compound exercise or body weight exercise if I'm on the road per day, because I've been exercising for over 20 years, and I still, on occasion, actually quite frequently, I don't look forward to it. It's like, oh, I got to exercise today. And I realized that a lot of that is just because the act of exercising can be overwhelming. Like, oh, I'm going to be in the gym for an hour, and do I have time? And I got to get dressed and go to this place, and Well, what if you could just streamline all of that and just do one thing? Like, just focus on one thing. So, for instance, just push-ups. Just do 20 push-ups, and you have your whole day to do them. You can do 5 in the morning, 5 in the afternoon, 5, and you have little triggers. So whenever the phone rings, I do 5 push-ups, or whenever I get water, I do 5 push-ups. You kind of habit stack, I guess, as James Clear talks about. And you always do that just on Mondays. So Monday's your push-up day. So every Monday, you already know what you're going to do. There's no confusion. You already know how many you're going to do. And so you just keep building, maybe adding another couple of reps each week. And then before you know it, you're doing 50 push-ups. And it's taken you, several weeks to get to that point. And Tuesdays are squats. So you can do body weight squats. You can do chair squats. For instance, we're sitting in chairs right now. So you can just put your feet out in front of you, hips distance apart, lean forward a little bit, keep your back straight, and stand up. And then sit back down. And then do that 10 times, right? And that's where you start. The next week, you do it 11 times on Tuesdays. And then Wednesdays, back days, I've got a little pull-up bar by my house, and I had to put some resistance bands around the bar, put my feet in one of them, and then that gave me some assistance while pulling myself up and working my way up to doing 10 body weight pull-ups. And
unassisted?
Unassisted. Wow. And this is kind of like the measure of functional strength. If you can do 10 as a guy, if you can do 10 body weight pull-ups, unassisted, full extension, if you can do, I think, 40 push-ups, unbroken, and if you can run a mile, that's the measure for being in functional strength.
Wow.
And that's the goal, is to be able to be functionally strong, old into old age.
Yeah, I mean, most people are not aspiring to be like bodybuilders or
No.
strength athletes. It's just about like cultivating functional strength, mobility, so that you can continue to move, right, and be like a functional, effective somebody with agency out in the world.
And I've been through phases in my life where I have done a lot of bodybuilding and gotten kind of big and gained a bunch of weight, gained a bunch of muscle, and I've also had the skinny experience as well. And just as you get older, especially as a man, I think one of the misconceptions that we have as men is that women want you to be muscular and big, but that's not usually the case.
They don't. Yeah.
They don't.
I mean, some do. But.
Some do, but I think the majority of them don't. They want you to be healthy.
Yeah.
But they don't care. They care more about who you are than what you look like as you get older. And so again, I'm in my middle age, so. That's been my priority, and I'm on kind of a maintenance program now. Like, I want to stay strong just because it feels better to be strong and healthy than it does to be a couch potato.
It's so funny. So many guys, I think, they start working out to get chicks, and then what they find is that the majority of compliments that they get come from dudes,
Right.
And honestly, working out shouldn't be to get approval from anybody. It should really be like once you start to gain a sense of what exercise can do for your mental health,
your discipline,
for your discipline, all the other areas in your life where the discipline has like a spillover effect. You start to see the rewards. It's like night and day.
Yeah.
That becomes the feedback loop.
Yeah, but again, just to be real, that's why people may start working out, is they think that once they get all these abs and everything, everyone's going to be all impressed with them. But that's not always the case.
Yeah,
you still have to develop yourself, your character, and your personality.
100%.
And that's usually how you're going to achieve things and form partnerships with people. It's based on who you are.
Yeah,
more than how you look.
So yes, I mean, you take this I love the minimalist approach to fitness, because I think a lot of people, especially on social media, there's, a lot of people will gain traction on social media from presenting these like really complicated, convoluted like exercise moves, like these really unique moves. But all the movements that you've listed, like, all you need essentially is a push, a pull, and some kind of like squat.
Yeah.
And you're golden.
Yeah.
And progressive overload, which is how, you get stronger, your muscles grow. People have this idea that it has to involve progressively increasing the weight, but it can be, an increase in reps, range of motion,
how much time in between.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you pay attention to all of that. And I put together this 108-day movement challenge for my community, which is called the Happiness Insiders. And normally these online challenges, they have like a 3% completion rate. And this one had about an 80% completion rate with people starting it. And I just started it just like that, like just do 10 reps. Because obviously you're going to want to do more than 10. And the goal is to take the tortoise approach instead of the hare approach and to always leave you wanting more. I mean, imagine wanting to go and work out more than you're actually able to. So every day you're just anticipating, okay, when can I do my thing? And that's exactly where you want to be when it comes to your relationship with working out. Because most people have the opposite, where they just get so depleted and anxious about it because it's so challenging and they're so overwhelming and all the things they're going to have to do that they easily talk themselves out of doing it. So
Yeah.
Another thing that I've been experimenting with is replacing the counting of reps with affirmations.
Whoa.
So for those of us who are into like affirmations, which are basically positive thought statements such as, I am perfect, whole, complete. Because in certain spiritual circles, they believe that if you put your attention on what you want to happen, you will be able to make that thing happen a lot easier versus talking negatively to yourself, which, I think is a default mode for a lot of people. So instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 through your push-ups, you use the affirmation. You use a 5-word affirmation. I am, each rep, perfect, whole, complete. Next set, I am perfect, whole, complete. Next set, Dad is perfect, whole, complete. Next set, James is, whatever. You can do it for your friends, you can do it for you. But imagine the energy you would feel, the shift in your energy from saying those affirmations versus using these arbitrary numbers, which don't really mean anything to you. So you're just kind of going through the motions, right?
Yeah.
Versus creating a type of experience that you ultimately want to have. And you're saying it in the present tense, which is really the only requirement as an affirmation, is that it has to be affirming something that you feel is happening right now. And you can make up your own. You can make up a 10-word affirmation if you have a 10-count set, or you can repeat that twice or whatever you can remember easily, or even have it written out next to you. That's one thing that makes exercising a little bit more interesting and powerful. Another thing is taking a moment and dedicating your set to something, some cause, or someone who's having a bit of an unfortunate time.
Ooh.
As a way of kind of motivating yourself to get through it. Because if it's just about you, it's easier to give up or not put all your effort into it versus if it's about someone else or something else. And you say, I'm dedicating this set of 5 push-ups to the starving children of the world or whatever. And as you're in the middle of, I am perfect whole, you're thinking about that as well, which gives you just a little bit more motivation and inspiration.
I love it.
Keep going.
Because so many people, they use exercise to punish themselves,
right,
for things that they've eaten, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you look at exercise differently, if you look at it as a means of celebrating what your body can do,
celebration of strength,
and then
agility,
and then integrate that into a gratitude practice and the acknowledgement that not everybody is in a position to be able to do the things that you can do,
right?
Yeah.
So it checks the meditation box, it checks the gratitude box, could check the prayer box, and you are exercising all together. You're doing more with less.
I love it.
That's the essence of minimalism, and particularly spiritual minimalism, which is inside out minimalism.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, my dad is his health is pretty poor right now. I mean, we're in the eye of the storm, essentially. It's been a difficult past couple of weeks where we're starting to see all of my dad's unhealthy habits come to roost at this stage in his life. He's in his like mid 70s,
Yep.
and has never done. I mean, I'm not even being hyperbolic. Like he's never done anything like good to his body ever. He's just been. He's been I think a lifelong hedonist, drinking, smoking, whatever provides that like momentary acute dose of pleasure, is where my dad kind of has oriented himself towards. And it's been really difficult to see because, now he's in a state of frailty. He's basically unable to work out or anything like that. And so it just makes when I go to the gym and I'm seeing my health continuously improve,
Yep.
and my lifts continuously improve, and my body composition, it's like, I'm so thankful like that and it's not that I have good genes or anything like that. I think a lot of people think that you've got to have good genes. Like I'm not particularly strong. I don't have particularly good genetics or anything, of the sort. I've just, worked really hard at it, and my gratitude for what my body's able to do has fomented that. That habit for me.
Yeah. And, unfortunately, people in that situation are just considered normal. That's basically normal in our society, just hedonistic lifestyle, trying to fulfill the endless cravings of the body and not going above and beyond. Like being healthy is seen as going above and beyond. And I've got a part in this book as well, which talks about abstaining from alcohol, which also is kind of having a moment right now. People are pulling away from alcohol more than ever before, except I'm not talking about it in terms of, being anti-alcohol. I'm talking about it in terms of being pro-awareness, because if there's anything standing in between you and your sort of inner guidance or intuition or, all the internal stuff that we ultimately want to tap into, it's the state of inebriation. And it's not even about, indefinite. I still drink alcohol on occasion, right? Very rare occasion. But I say that you want to at least be able to go 3 months without it. If you can't go 3 months without it, then you're probably addicted to it. But if you can go 3 months without alcohol, so dry January, February, and March, then you know that you have a little bit more control over it, in which case you can probably hear your voice of intuition a lot easier, right? Otherwise, you're defaulting towards that voice that's telling you that alcohol is not that big of a deal. Go ahead and have a drink. Or that's not the voice of your intuition, but that's the dominating voice in your awareness. And that voice is also going to have you staying in a relationship far too long, not being able to let go of the soul-sucking job, and essentially being afraid of betting on yourself, being afraid of taking a leap of faith, being afraid of doing the things that and it's going to sound airy-fairy, but your heart is guiding you to do. But when you look back on your life at any stage, the best parts of your life were the parts where you did listen to that voice. You did take the leap of faith. You did bet on yourself. You did trust in something higher or greater than yourself. And it landed you in a position that probably wasn't certain, but you felt more present than ever before. You felt more passionate than ever before. And that led to an amazing experience that started with you saying, oh, something told me to ... And you listened to that and you went with it. So that's the power of sobriety. And then once you get to your 3-month mark, the 90 days, have a glass of wine, have a beer, whatever you want to have, but you'll probably be less reliant on it in order to feel that sense of fulfillment inside.
When you choose to drink, why do so? Why do you drink?
So I literally have one restaurant in Mexico City that I drink at, and it serves very spicy foods, and they have this kind of mezcal daiquiri that just pairs well with the taste of the food. You can't even taste the mezcal. If it didn't have mezcal in it, I still would order it, right? And that's the only situation really that I drink. This is my favorite restaurant in the whole world. But other than that, it never occurs to me to drink. And also, when I do drink like a glass of wine or something like that, I can't sleep at night. I get headaches. I mean, I'm so sensitive to it because I haven't really been drinking it for such a long time.
Yeah.
And I went for probably 15 years with no alcohol at all.
Oh, interesting.
So I just literally started back on occasion drinking mezcal. And mezcal actually doesn't give you a hangover, apparently.
Yeah.
So just because I'm in Mexico City, and I'm not a you know, I like to be a little bit flexible. I don't consider myself to be extreme with anything.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your book, Genius Foods, is actually what I would consider to be a minimalist approach to eating, because you're looking at, okay, red meat and salt, and, you know, you go through and list all the categories, and you talk about all the different benefits of these categories. And so that would also be considered a minimalist approach to diet, because you're looking at, okay, how can I get the most nutrients, the biggest bang for the buck?
100%. Yeah. Like, if you had to, I mean, it's an interesting kind of thought experiment. If you had to, like, what would be if you could only ingest like the minimally effective dose of food, what would those foods be? Like, what would be your thought process when it came to choosing those foods? You'd want to choose the most nutrient dense foods available.
So let's just look at it with working out.
Yeah.
Protein.
There you go.
Don't worry about, like, I know this is going to sound controversial for people who are really into this, but don't worry about counting calories. Don't worry about counting macros. Eat more protein than you think you should, and that's probably still going to be under the required amount in order to keep the muscle on, and everything else will sort of take care of itself, because you're going to displace, just through eating protein, you're going to displace cravings for other BS, you know, foods that you probably would have eaten otherwise.
Yeah.
So if you just focus on eating protein, and I didn't come up with this, I asked my friends who were nutritionists and bodybuilders and stuff, like, how do I get to that? Let's talk about it with me and you. Like, you work out. We talked about this before. I've been on a target of 150 to 200 grams of protein a day.
Great.
That's my minimalist approach to keeping on muscle.
How much do you weigh?
I'm 210.
210. Yeah, that's a good starting place.
Yeah. And I can't always get to 200 is a good day.
Yeah.
Right? For those of us who are listening to this who may think, okay, I just want to eat more protein, how do you get there? How do you get there while on your busiest day while traveling? How could you get to 200 grams of protein?
Well,
and I'll tell you some of my tips too.
Yeah, please. Well, you're probably more experienced with the travel, aspect of things than I am, but whenever I'm out in restaurants, I mean, I order the grilled meat, or I order the eggs, or I order the whatever it is. But, I know generally if I'm eating at a steakhouse, or any restaurant for that, I mean, you can find steak and eggs anywhere. If I'm getting 6 to 8 ounces of lean protein, lean is actually like kind of an important distinction, because
so that's 35 grams, right?
Or more. No, if I'm like 6 to 8, that you're
50.
It's almost like 50 grams of protein right there.
Uh-huh.
But lean is important because you're getting more protein calories and fewer fat calories. So you're like concentrating the protein in a lean cut. Like, so a filet mignon would be a better choice than like a ribeye.
So that's 50 grams.
50 grams.
Your eggs are 6 grams each.
Eggs are 6 grams each, so I'll try to eat like 3 to 4 eggs. And you could also like add egg whites, like if you happen to be in a hotel or whatever where they have an omelet station. I'll do like 1 or 2 whole eggs, and then I'll add them to put the rest in egg whites, because you're concentrating the protein calories.
So that's like 75 grams total for one meal.
Yeah, throw in some Canadian bacon or ham or whatever, and then
bacon is 4 grams per slice.
Yeah, but bacon's like a unique food, because most people would think of bacon as a high protein food because it's meat, but it's actually not. It's predominantly fat. So you really want to be kind of like careful when describing a food as like a high protein food, not to include foods that are predominantly fat.
Okay.
For example, like nuts. Most people in the plant-based community would say nuts are a staple protein source, but if you actually like look at the macros of most nuts, they're mainly fat calories. Like you're mainly ingesting fat calories. So I'm looking at like, where are all the places that I can optimize for protein calories? And it's like fat-free Greek yogurt is a great option. Protein shakes.
So I saw you post something about mixing protein powder in Greek yogurt. I've been doing that, which is fantastic.
It's like 50 grams right there.
That's 50 grams right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I do travel with protein powders. So I definitely travel with protein powder. Throw them in my backpack. And
So just that one meal plus the protein powder and the Greek yogurt, now we're at 125 grams.
we're talking what, steak and eggs plus the protein powder?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
roughly.
and
yeah.
the Greek yogurt.
Yeah.
That's a meal and a snack.
And that doesn't include dinner. And dinner, you're probably getting another 50 grams. 50 grams of protein right there. If you can order an appetizer on top of that, some like, beef carpaccio or like sliced fish, I forget what it's called, like, some kind of like
Sashimi
or whatever, you're getting additional protein.
Is it better to do raw versus cooked for protein, or no? That doesn't matter.
Well, a raw protein is going to weigh more than a cooked protein. So like 8 ounces of raw beef is going to have less protein than 8 ounces of cooked beef, obviously, because when you cook it, you dehydrate it a little bit, right? And you lose some of the fat mass. So generally, yeah, you want to weigh it, if you're weighing it, to be really accurate after it's been cooked, But yeah, I mean, I think protein powders are a great way to get your numbers up. Now, like, the standard recommendation for protein, like most people are hitting that. Protein deficiency is extremely rare. So like, why should people be striving to get, what you're essentially trending towards, which is like roughly 1 gram per pound of body weight? You don't have to hit 1 gram. Like 0.7 is sufficient. But
I'm 50. I'm trying to maintain my muscle mass and build a little bit more muscle mass and lean up a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, as you get older, anabolic resistance tends to develop. Which is like a confluence of like protein digestion and utilization. So yeah, you want to generally but I think 0.7 to 0.8 grams times your body weight is a great starting place. And what that is that's what the research suggests tends to be like the general minimum optimal threshold to maximize your muscle protein synthesis and prevent muscle protein breakdown. So like less than that, and you're not really reaping the full benefit of like what protein can do for your body composition. And then also, and more protein, it's the most satiating macronutrient. So using protein, like hitting that number is going to prevent you from overeating like the carbohydrates and the fat. So there's many different roles that it plays. And that's why we generally say like, prioritize protein, you have this, like, you're always lean. Like you don't like obsess over your body composition, right? But every time I see you, like, you look great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also, again, not drinking. I'm not consuming lots of sugar, especially refined sugar at all. And I eat like French fries on occasion and, things like that on occasion, but it's definitely not a feature. It's not a common feature in my diet protocols. So I've just been focusing on the protein. That's what I've been very intentionally doing.
Love it.
For a while.
And you're like, you eat meat, eggs.
I eat meat, eggs, all that. I mean, right now I'm just eating for efficiency. Like, so I probably will choose a higher protein content food item versus something just for taste, for instance, because it's not really doing it. It's not helping me achieve the goal that I have.
Yeah.
And that's really what this whole journey has been about, is just looking at everything, man, how much time you're spending picking out your clothes. Okay, well, which articles of clothing do you love the most? Which ones fit you the best? Well, just focus on that. Just wear that all the time. It doesn't have to be the same uniform, but, maybe you have 3 shirts and you just focus on those 3 shirts, or you have 2 pairs of pants. Like, I only have 1 pair of pants right now. That's all I have. And I have, probably 5 or 6 shirts and 1 pair of shoes. I'm wearing those pair of shoes right now, and that's it. I just wear them every day.
But what if you're like into fashion or style or whatever,
You can be stylish as you want to be. I say, accessorize. Have like an accessory that you really, really love that's kind of unique to you. And maybe that's a hat, maybe it's a string of mala beads, maybe it's some sort of scarf that you like to wear. Maybe it's your watch or your socks, things like that. And again, this is not encouraging people to get rid of all their stuff. I do recommend experimenting, though, if you are inclined to get rid of some things, don't get rid of them right away. You have to test it first. And the way you test it is you pack maybe a carry-on bag as if you were going to go away for a week, and you put everything you think you would use into that carry-on bag, whether it's clothes, protein powder, whatever it is, and you only live from that bag within your house that week as much as you can. And if you find 2 days into it that you really needed this thing, just put it in the back, but you got to take something out. And so by the end of the week, you'll have a pretty good sense of what you really, really love and need. And you'll have to use some creativity in terms of, washing or ironing or, figuring out how to keep things fresh. And there's a part of this to teach people how to hand wash, which was a huge game changer for me. It's as big of a game changer as learning how to properly exercise to put on muscle, which is something I learned relatively recently. Because before that, I was just running and doing a bunch of calisthenics every day, and I was never able to get size until I started doing compound training and, squatting, deadlifting, and bench pressing and stuff like that. And then I got 30 pounds within 6 months.
Damn. When was this?
This was about 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
So like
I went from 172 to 210, what I am right now, 210 pounds.
Wow.
So
amazing.
I read, John Berardi?
The name rings a bell.
He's like a Canadian trainer, nutritionist, and he had this program called Precision Nutrition, and one of the sub-programs from that was called Scrawny to Brawny. And he had a book called Scrawny to Brawny that I found online, and I got the book, and it was all about how to go from being an exomorph to gaining muscle mass. And so he was like, you got to stop doing the same push-ups and sit-up exercise routine every day. You got to switch it up. You have to, you have to shock the body and blah, blah, blah. And you have to eat way more than you think you're eating. And I thought I was eating a lot, but I had to eat probably 4 times as much. And that's when I went from being a vegan to starting to eat meat again, because it was just more efficient to just eat some fish protein and salmon. And I was like, okay, this is definitely working. And I was vegan for 12 years. But I was never able to get over 172. And I'm not saying that it's not possible.
Why were you vegan for so long?
You buy into the whole thing. I bought into the whole thing. I read all the China study and all this stuff. And, I didn't have a Max Lugavere in my life to enlighten me. So,
oh, man.
And what? Interesting. I actually enjoyed it. I really enjoyed being vegan.
Well, it seems like you enjoy.
But I was coming from eating fast food.
Got it.
Prior to being vegan. It's not like I was eating grass-fed whatever and then I went to become vegan.
Right.
I was literally eating Wendy's, Arby's, Domino's, and then vegan, and I was like, oh, it feels so much better.
Yeah, that's commonly how it happens.
Right. And but I wasn't eating like fake meats and stuff like that. I was eating mostly kale salads and nuts and stuff. But going back to eating salmon, and I never disliked meat. I loved the taste of meat. I just chose not to eat it. And it opened up this whole other world. I was eating avocados. I never ate avocados before. I was eating all these vegetables and things I never would have had. So I enjoyed it for the variety and the diversity, and it just made it that much better when I went back to eating the protein. I started with eating fish again, and then eating meat, and then chicken, and and I haven't looked back since.
Great. Yeah, it seems like you thrive when you're able to strip away a lot of like the analysis paralysis, like whether it's like with wardrobe or, in this case with food, just having a more narrow range of, like, giving yourself a narrower range of options, whereas previously it had been like the sky is the limit. You're just going to fucking eat like a Labrador retriever, and then suddenly you have like, okay, we've got these parameters in place. This, it seems like that kind of like you tend to gravitate towards the paradigms like that.
Yeah, and it also taught me, that nothing lasts forever. So it makes you have more compassion, because a lot of times when you are vegan, you start to project that on the other people, and you're judging people, and oh my God, you're going to have a heart attack one day, and blah blah blah, and things change. You have different seasons, and I tell people, even when it comes to things like breakups, like, well, if you get back together, I would understand. I'm not going to shame them for thinking of getting back together with somebody, because it happens. You go from vegan to eating meat, maybe I'll be vegan again one day. I don't know, but it's possible, right? Because anything is possible.
Right.
and you may break up with someone and have all the best reasons in the world to not be with them, and then a year later something shifts and you're back together with that person. And again, this is the minimalist approach.
Yeah.
So when I talk about spiritual minimalism, how do I define spirituality? Spirituality is how many contradicting truths can you hold in your awareness all together at the same time. You are spiritual to the extent that you can hold multiple contradictory truths in your awareness. You're not binary. You're not, it's got to be this or that. They're right or I'm right and they're wrong or anything like that. And that's what it is, because it's that concept of oneness, which is there's enough room for everybody to have their little experiences. And whatever experience you're having, like we can argue, I had to have that vegan experience in order for me to be as enthusiastic about the stuff you're talking about now, because otherwise it would just be theory.
I'm just thinking about all the steak you missed out on.
You know what's funny is I eat steak now, and I'm like, thank God I'm not vegan anymore, because I would hate to miss out on
what is your favorite meal? Like if you were going to the chair tomorrow, what would be your last meal?
Ethiopian. Oddly enough, it's a vegetarian Ethiopian meal, and I just love the taste of it.
I love Ethiopian food.
Yeah, we have to go to this place because it's right here in LA, and this is one of the highlights of coming back to LA is going to this. I'll tell you what it is.
What's it called? Yeah, give them a shout out.
It's called Meals by Gannett. That's the name of the place. The woman who runs it, her name is Gannett, and it's the veggie combo. It's going to sound weird to your audience, okay? But just hear me out. The veggie combo with the tofu tibs made with butter. Mm-hmm. It just melts in your mouth. I don't like tofu. Right?
Interesting.
Normally, I would totally get the meat stuff, but with Ethiopian, the meat, I'm kind of like, the vegetarian stuff is usually better than the meat stuff, just taste-wise.
Interesting.
But yeah, the way she sautés those tofu tibs, it's just like, it's just mouth-watering. It's fantastic. That would be my last meal. What would your last meal be?
Oh, man. Well, I think probably I've got three answers. So, I mean, my favorite food is, I love steak. I love a good steak. Mm-hmm. On par with a good steak for me would be sushi. I love sushi. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love, in particular, there's a chain in LA and in New York called Sugarfish that I happen to really, really enjoy.
They do those beautiful boxes?
Beautiful boxes. Yeah. I just love the consistency of it. Mm-hmm. And I love the simplicity. Like a lot of people, a lot of these sushi restaurants, it's like, how many ways can we innovate on the sushi roll? There's all these different, elaborate, convoluted. I'm not into any of that shit. Mm-hmm. Like when I want sushi, what I want is fish on rice. Mm-hmm. That's it, man. That's it. That's all I want. And so Sugarfish is really easy because that's basically all they have to offer, you know? Mm-hmm. So that's what I get. And then I would say my third choice for a long time, I would have answered the question by saying ribs from Hillstone, which is formerly Houston's.
In Santa Monica?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're ribs, man. Yeah. So good.
Those are good. Yeah.
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 Good barbecue in general. In Austin, there's Terry Black's. There's that would probably be my favorite. There's also La Barbecue. So yeah, it's probably, but I think probably a good steak or a good sushi. Probably I love it, man.
Would you have fries and stuff that you wouldn't ordinarily eat?
No, I'm not that. I mean, for me, it's one of the reasons why it's so easy for me to practice what I preach, because I genuinely love a good steak, good sushi. Fries don't really tempt me. You can put the best fries in front of me on the table, and if I have one, I'll want to have a dozen or more. I'll want to eat the whole thing, the whole container or whatever. But it's very easy for me to not even try any. And
what's your relationship with alcohol like?
I drink once a month, if that, these days.
Why?
Not even
because you're with friends or.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's it'll be on
a date.
On a date, and I like a good glass of wine. I enjoy a nice tequila, but not essential for me. I just don't. But I do think it's fun sometimes. I'm not dogmatic. I mean, I know it's not healthy. I know I'm drinking a neurotoxin, but I do enough in my life where I feel like I've enough counterbalances in place in my life where I feel totally fine.
Yeah,
drinking every now and then.
Yeah.
I don't want to be never to anything, But I just want to be able to, I like knowing that I'm able to moderate myself with hedonic things.
Yeah.
Whether it's like birthday cake or French fries or alcohol or whatever, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good skill to have.
Yeah, yeah. And that's kind of the essence of this approach, this spiritual minimalism approach, is to put yourself in the best possible position to control the things you can control.
Yeah.
Because you don't realize how much you're not in control of your thoughts. Like people think, oh, just choose happiness. Well, you can't choose happiness if you have a lot of cortisol in your body, because cortisol is known as the stress chemical, the worry chemical, right? And the reason why you may be tossing and turning at night is not because of what happened during the day. It's because the cortisol is attaching what happened during the day to what happened 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. And it's telling your body, oh, you got attacked when you were 8 years old, when mommy and daddy didn't do whatever they needed to do. And it's associating it with this thing that happened at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon. And now your body is going into low grade or maybe high grade fight or flight, in which case the last thing the body wants to do is sleep in that situation. So you're up in the middle of the night, you're tossing and turning, which means you've now compromised arguably the most important period of time for rehabilitation, so that you can then get up the next day and go into your day and meet those challenges and demands with lots of adaptation energy. You don't have as much adaptation energy, which makes you susceptible to another stress reaction, which is going to eventually hardwire whatever that thing that's happening at your job or in your relationship with what happened when you were 8. And then it's just a direct relationship. And then your body just thinks you're in a relationship with, toxic mommy or deadbeat daddy or whatever's going on. And that, as Joe Dispenza says, that turns into your personality eventually because you identify with it so heavily. So talking about, breaking that pattern through practices like stillness, through gratitude, etc., is a way of letting go of that emotional baggage from the inside out, because you can't intellectualize your way out of that. You have to put your body in the optimal position to work its biochemical magic to liberate you, to emancipate you from your past. Otherwise, it's really hard to be present. It's really hard to hear your inner guidance or your intuition, and therefore it's really hard to take action steps in the direction of whatever you've already maybe identified with as your path and your purpose, but you can't seem to move in that direction. You feel stuck. You're probably coming up with excuses like you don't have enough time, you don't have enough this or that. And all that means is that you are engaged in the do more to accomplish less approach to life, which means those excuses are very legitimate excuses. You don't feel like going to the gym. You are too tired to eat healthy, because the cortisol essentially has taken over your body like a zombie or something, right? And so the first step in this spiritual minimalism path is you have to make time to get still, not because you give a shit about meditation, but because you give a shit about liberating yourself from your past so that you can be present to whatever's happening right now, so you can make better choices that are more aligned with what you already say and think is in your purpose or your path.
Yeah. How do you convince somebody who's resistant to meditation to meditate? Like, I've gone through phases where I'll meditate every day. I've occasionally meditated twice a day, but in general, I always inevitably end up falling off the wagon and going back to my non-meditating ways. Well,
let me ask you this. When you go back to your non-meditating ways, what is that like? Talk about that state of we'll call it normality.
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm buoyed still by the things that I do in my life that I have instituted to help me self-regulate, like the mental challenges that I think we all,
such as exercise,
eating a healthful diet, friendships, going on walks, calling up my brother, having a download, cuddling my cat.
Yeah. And all of that is great, right? All that is great. And if you combine enough of those things together, it could almost deliver to you the effects of a daily meditation practice. And so what that means on the flip side is that a daily meditation practice can gift you with the oxytocin and the serotonin and the dopamine of the combined effect of playing with your pet, being in positive relationships, eating healthy and da-da-da-da. It doesn't replace any of that, and none of that replaces meditation. But if you can, I consider the meditation to be like a key domino that makes you want to do more of those things, right? Because without that key domino, you have to be in a very fortunate situation to be able to do those things, right? You have to be in a place where you have positive friends, and you have to have the pet, and you have to have maybe enough resources to go to a farmer's market and get high quality foods and but most people don't have those things. So you're stuck with kind of whatever is available, and therefore the meditation in that situation can subsidize whatever you're not getting from your environment enough for you to maybe make a better choice for yourself and change your environment and put yourself in proximity to some of those things that you feel like you ultimately want. Because the goal of meditation is not to become a monk. It's just to become a better version of you. And when you become a better version of you, you'll get more job opportunities, you'll get better dating opportunities, you'll get better lifestyle opportunities, you'll create more for yourself. And a lot of times people need pain to get there, and or curiosity, enough curiosity. And this is, it's the same thing with anyone out there who's living what we would consider to be an extraordinary life. They've done more than the average person in some area of life. If you have an extraordinary body, they've done more physically. You walking around with this freaking, scale. Most people don't have a scale measuring their food, but if you look at the results after 6 months, it's clear that you're doing more than the average person. And maybe somebody who has a little bit of belly fat, doesn't care to have a six-pack, but they probably also don't realize how much more efficient they can make those choices if they just went a little bit beyond what they would normally do. So if you have an inclination to go above and beyond a little bit, then you'll find that meditation can be really effective in helping you achieve the goals that you have. Otherwise, if you're happy with being normal, then, don't meditate and it's fine. You can still have a great life without meditation.
Well, but normal today is like anxious, depressed.
Exactly. Overweight.
Yeah.
Impotent.
Yeah.
On Viagra, So again, if you once you experience enough of that pain, then hopefully that will propel you towards some above and beyond practices.
How did you discover meditation?
So I discovered meditation, oddly enough, through modeling. And I talk about that in the book, where I was living in, well, let me start from the beginning. So I graduated college with a degree in advertising. I worked at an ad agency. There was a dream job right out of college, art direction, ad agency, boutique agency, which means I had a lot of opportunities to work with really big clients. And I was there, and I was like looking around, and I looked at the people who were there the longest, and I thought to myself, is that the kind of life that I want to have, right? And they were good people, nice people, funny people, doing really well monetarily and everything. But I don't know, I just kind of did the math in my head, and I was like, this will always be there. I can always come back to this and just dedicate whatever 20 years to this experience and then retire and blah, blah, blah. So since I'm only 22 years old, let me go out and experience more of the world. So I actually quit that job after 3 months. And little did I know that would be my one and only, quote, real job, 9-to-5 job in an office. And I did a little amateur modeling in college. So then I started doing some local modeling in Chicago, which is where I was living. And cut a long story short, ended up in New York City. Took a few leaps of faith, realized that, oh my God, there's like this guidance inside of me that it's giving me these ideas. And when I say yes to them and I do things that I'm not certain about, it kind of works out in these amazing ways. So I'm in New York City and I'm modeling full time. And the thing about being a full-time model is you don't have to really work a lot. You may get one job a week, maybe you get 2 jobs a month, but that can be enough to pay your bills. So what are you doing all that in between time? I started taking yoga classes just because I was at the gym. I was at Equinox the first Equinox in the world on Amsterdam Avenue. I was working in that gym, and I was doing shoulder presses, and I noticed that these girls over by the exercise room were all standing there barefoot with little rolled up rubber things under their arms, and then they started filing into the class, and my hormones told me, go into that classroom and see what those really beautiful looking girls were up to. And I went in there, and that was my very first yoga class. This is in 96 or 97.
Wow.
And so I was there initially for the women. I look around. I'm the only guy. I'm the only straight guy in the class. I'm like, this is fantastic. I need to come back here again. So I went back again and again. And ironically, I hated the yoga because I wasn't very flexible at all. I never stretched a day in my life. But eventually, I started going more for the yoga because it felt good to stretch in those ways. Then I was going for the girls, and I became a yoga enthusiast. And then it was through doing yoga at Equinox. And they used to have like old school yoga teachers, right? These are the early days of yoga in the fitness classes. So these guys were all kind of like, from these monastic sort of traditions.
Wow.
And they used to say yoga is a preparation for meditation. And then I became friends with the teachers, and then they started inviting me to different meditation circles. And so I would just go because it was a unique, novel thing to do. I was also experimenting with veganism, which was a part of sort of the yoga, culture at the time. And yeah, and I didn't really have any significant experiences for years. I just sat there, what felt like staring at the back of my eyelids, just like, okay, what's supposed to happen? Is anything happening? Peeking around, see if anybody else is experiencing anything, nothing. And then I would leave thinking that maybe there was something wrong with me or something wrong with my mind. And it wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles and gave up the modeling and decided to become a full-time yoga teacher that I met the man who became my meditation teacher, who really properly taught me. This is, you train with Emily Fletcher, right?
Yeah.
So the guy that trained me, Emily studied with him as well. And so he talked about sitting comfortably, which was a game changer. He talked about not focusing on anything.
Why was that a game changer?
Because otherwise you're sitting with your back straight and your legs crossed perhaps. And what you don't realize is that any degree of physical activity while meditating, even if you're just holding your fingers together, your thumb and your index finger, you're having to use your you're having to use physical activity to hold that position because it's not a natural position. If you fell asleep, that wouldn't happen.
Right.
So if you're doing that and you're holding your shoulders back or your chest out or your head up or you're crossing your legs and that's not completely comfortable, that degree of physical activity is going to correlate with mental activity. So you're actually making your mind busier just by sitting in a even slightly uncomfortable way. And there's no way that your mind is going to get settled in that experience. So that's considered to be the monastic approach to meditation. And there's a very specific reason why monks sit in that way. And it's because monks are kind of like Olympian athletes, right? What's the difference in a weekend warrior and an Olympian athlete? There's really only one difference: resistance. They experience more resistance than the weekend warrior, right? In other words, they've trained hours and hours, days and days, weeks and weeks, months and months, years and years. Whereas the weekend warrior only experiences resistance on the weekends.
Right.
So their body doesn't get much stronger or nearly as strong as the Olympian athletes. So like that, the monks are like the Olympian athletes of the casual meditators. And that resistance is, let me sit on a bed of nails.
Yeah.
Now let me sit and hold my arm up in the air the whole time. Now let me skip sleep and see if I can get into that higher consciousness state in that uncomfortable position. So they're looking for ways to resist their physicality.
Yeah.
And gravity. And if they can meditate through that, then they stabilize it. And then they go to more extreme ways.
Yes, they're not who we should aspire.
No.
towards.
And what we don't realize is that there are regular people styles of meditation known as householder styles that have coexisted along with monastic traditions for thousands of years. Those are the ones we want to emulate. And those require you to sit comfortably, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to have the proper experience that everybody ultimately wants to have, which is the opposite of the biggest complaint, which is my mind is all over the place. If you just sit comfortably and you meditate in that position,
like you're back supported,
legs at ease, arms at ease, you will increase your chances of settling your mind and therefore having a more enjoyable experience 1,000-fold.
Wow.
Just by changing your body position. So that was a game changer.
What a relief.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like it's a beginner style. No, that is the meditation, sitting comfortably.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more to it than that. You don't focus on your breath. You don't try to concentrate. You don't contemplate. You don't try to, imagine this or witness that or let go of this or notice that. All of those are monastic approaches, but those are commonly associated with the practice of meditation, which is why people always complain about it.
What about like the mantra? Like when I went through training, I received a mantra.
So the mantra is a point of focus. In popular parlance, that's what a mantra is. In the householder style of meditation, the mantra is a navigational device. The whole sole purpose of using a mantra, this is going to be, crazy, but the sole purpose of using a mantra is to forget about the mantra, to forget about the fact that you're meditating. If you don't have one, it's a lot harder to sit there with your mind kind of going all over the place, which is going to do, even if you're sitting comfortably, because that's what it's used to doing.
Right.
And so the mantra takes that and it essentially seduces the mind away from that busy surface awareness where you're hyper aware that you're meditating and that the kids are making some noises and that it's, there's construction outside and that the clock is ticking and all these different things that are happening around you. And it takes your mind away from that into a more subtle state of thinking. And this is the process of settling the mind. So I got a mantra from my teacher, and I went from having the staring at the back of my eyelids experience in meditation to feeling like I was going into this void within a few days. And that's the way I've been experiencing meditation for the last 20 years, which is why I've become such an enthusiast. And I was inspired to start teaching it in 2007 because I wanted to show other people how to do this, because this is like amazing. And I'm a huge skeptic, right? I question everything. And I feel like if it could work for me, it could work for anybody.
So you're a fan of having a mantra? Yeah,
I've given thousands of people mantras at this point.
Amazing.
And showed them all how to do it.
Well, I think for people like listening that are unfamiliar with the term, just to explain, it's basically like it's basically like a meaningless Sanskrit sound. It's like pronounceable, like you're verbally given it by your teacher, right? And it's just like a sound that doesn't. It's like a Sanskrit sound that doesn't have any meaning, so it doesn't like pull your brain into any, it doesn't like pull your mind into any one direction. It's not like the word one or anything like that. Right. It's just like a sound. Yeah. And you just like literally repeat it in your head over and over and over and over again. Yeah. And like when your thoughts go to the unread email that you've got to respond to, or the text message that you're waiting for from the cute girl or guy or whatever, you bring your attention back to this like sound.
Yeah. You want to get in? We can get into it if you want to.
Yeah.
So it's meaningless, and that's the point. You want the word to be meaningless because if it means something, you're right. The mind has things it can associate it with, right? Such as the word table, chair. If your mantra was the word table, you can be sitting there thinking of different tables that you've experienced in your life. Right. But if your mantra is bing bong or something like that, or bling bling or timbuk, shoo 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 or something like that, there's nothing for the mind to attach itself to. And as a consequence of that, it increases the chances of the mind leaving that sort of surface level thinking where everything means something and going into that more dreamy state where nothing means anything. They're still thoughts, but they're meaningless thoughts. So the mantra takes the mind to the realm where all the other meaningless thoughts reside, which happens to be just on the cusp of that void that I talked about, which is the thoughtless state. So you can't stop your mind from thinking by trying to think about not thinking, because that's surface level association. But you can position yourself to go into a void that is beyond thinking, and that's why they call it transcendence. So the mantra is a transcendence tool. It's a way of of going from that focused surface state into a more settled, almost a void state where you don't know what's happening. And the closest that you can get to that without meditating, and everybody's had this experience, and maybe some people will have this experience with my book. You're reading a book, it's late at night, you're in your bed, right, or in your couch or something, and you're reading the book, and you get to that one line in the book, and then time goes by, and you're still on that line in the book, and then more time goes by, and you're still on that same line in the book, except now you can't remember which book you're reading, right? Has that happened to you before?
Yeah.
Right. So there are gaps that you experience, and all the while you're becoming increasingly more and more forgetful of what you're doing. And that indicates that you're about to have a shift in your consciousness state. You're about to go from the waking state of consciousness into the sleeping state of consciousness. And anytime there's a consciousness state change, you're going to experience gaps in your awareness. So when you meditate, you experience a unique fourth state of consciousness, which they call the hypometabolic state of restful alertness, which commonly is known as the relaxation response. Dr. Herbert Benson did a whole book called The Relaxation Response in the 1970s. Still available. It's an excellent book. And it talks about all the different physiological changes that occur in that meditation state of consciousness, which blew his mind because he had been studying stress for years and years prior to that at Harvard University. And what he saw with meditators is that when you sit comfortably, you have the passive attitude, you have a point of focus or a mantra, your body essentially goes in the exact opposite direction of the stress reaction. So instead of getting a spike in your heart rate and your blood pressure and your oxygen consumption and all those things, it goes into a hypometabolic state, a lowered metabolic state, which means your body's energy output is starting to decrease instead of increase. And this was happening while people were just sitting there essentially doing nothing. And but like the other states of consciousness, it has a shelf life. So you can't sleep forever, you can't be awake forever, you can't dream forever. There's a certain amount of time that you can be in each of those states of consciousness in a balanced body. And with meditation, the longest you can sustain the relaxation response is about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you start naturally reverting back to the waking state of consciousness. But to get to that fourth state of consciousness, the relaxation response, you will have gaps in your awareness. So sitting there, starting out in the meditation, you are hyper aware that you're meditating. You begin your mantra, and then maybe after 2 or 3 minutes, you start having flashes of forgetfulness. So you may only have the mantra for 2 minutes in the entire 20 minutes. And then for 15 of those minutes, you're having these dreamlike thoughts.
Yeah.
And for 3 of those minutes, you're having no thoughts. But you don't remember the no thought part because you weren't thinking, you weren't aware.
But then when you remember, that's when you bring it back to the mantra.
When you are aware that you're meditating, then you come back to the mantra, and the mantra helps you to forget that you're meditating again.
Wow. And
you start dreaming again. So the point is not to be aware that you're meditating. This is where a lot of people go wrong with meditation. They think that they're supposed to be aware that they're meditating the whole time. The point is to be sitting there thinking about the conversation. When is the girl going to text me back? You know, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Because those thoughts reside just beyond the awareness that you're meditating. You have to go through the to-do list thoughts in order to get to the dreamy thoughts. And I diagrammed the whole thing out in one of my previous books called Bliss More, which I think I talked about on this podcast. So if you want to get more information about that and the whole process, get Bliss More, How to Succeed in Meditation Without Really Trying. But I also do a little truncated version of that in Travel Light.
How can people get a mantra to use? Because it's my understanding that
with Bliss More, I give a generic mantra.
You do, okay,
yeah.
Got it.
Which there are generic mantras that exist, and then if you come and work with someone like me, you get a personalized mantra.
Yeah. Based on what?
Based on
Vibes?
age and life stage, not vibes.
Not vibes.
No.
I love it. I mean, the book that you've got so many beautiful illustrations in the book, and yeah,
it's a book that's meant to be opened anywhere, so it's not meant to be read from cover to cover. Because honestly, I wanted a book that was a book that I would also read. And the way that I like to read books is, everybody, you get a book at the bookstore. What's the first thing you do? You just kind of doing what you're doing right now. You kind of cracked it open somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
You look around and you say, oh, that's a cool illustration. Well, you can start there and just read that section. Each section is only a page or 2 pages long. And then it will direct you. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure. It will direct you. If you want to know more about flaneuring, go to this page. Or if you want to learn more about how to hand wash your clothes, go to that page. Or if you want to know more about how to meditate, go to this page.
You've got this great list of all the many health benefits, or many of the health benefits of walking, which I really love. I bookmarked this page specifically because I thought it was such a great little concise, like bit of inspo to get out and walk more. But like helping to prevent heart disease, reducing your chances of lung disease, reducing blood sugar and triglycerides. It's so great. There's a lot in here. I love books. There was a term for it, and I totally forgot. But essentially, I like books where they're just like, short little anecdotes followed by like lots of facts. With like obviously well written. Like the facts are wrapped in writing that's easy to digest. But when books have like really long, drawn out anecdotes, and they continually refer to those like that same anecdote, it drives me nuts. It just doesn't work well for my like ADD brain. Like I like a short anecdote.
Yeah.
And the book and books that are broken up by like different sections. Like a more staccato experience.
Yeah. I think if we're being honest, I think most regular people like those kinds of books, because how often do you, to be honest, how often do you finish books?
Not often. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like I write books, but I don't often read them cover to cover. And I have a podcast, and I don't often listen to. People are always like, what podcasts do I listen to? And I don't listen to many.
Yeah.
If any. I listen to my own. I really do. People think it's funny. I listen to my own.
Get high on your own supply.
Yes. I listen back to my own podcast more than pretty much anything other than like music that I love. Because I'm always like, like there are things that, as present as I am with you and my other guests, there are inevitably things that I miss.
Right.
And so, like people come on here when they have something to say, when they're brilliant. So I get value like out of listening to them more than once.
Yeah.
Like else.
I have a podcast too. And, so you always are getting guests to written books or promoting their book. And, so I've read hundreds of books of guests, and I feel like you don't even have to read the whole book most of the time.
Yeah.
Because there's like one major point, one central point, and they just kind of repeat different variations of that central theme.
Yeah, a lot of books. Not all.
Not all, but a lot of them. A lot of them. I would say more than people may anticipate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just different styles. People just learn differently, and I think that's something that's like that we tend to underappreciate. Mm-hmm. I don't think we underappreciate it. I don't think listeners of this podcast that would be a novel, particularly novel concept to people who regularly listen to me or are plugged into like personal development and all that stuff. But certainly our education system, is built in a way that tends to kind of put everybody through the same assembly line.
The TSA approach to
learning. Approach, exactly, to education, which we're all different. We learn differently. It's like, it's a big problem. Some people learn better, through voice. Some learn better through reading. Some learn better visually. Some learn better with their bodies, so who knows? Yeah.
Well, anyways, this was definitely conversational in the way that because that's the kind of stuff I like to read for myself. So
I love it. Well, people should definitely go and check it out, pick it up, support Travel Light by Light Watkins, my homie. Spiritual minimalism to live a more fulfilled life. I want that, man. I want to live a more fulfilled life.
I think you're living a pretty fulfilled life over here, sir.
I feel pretty fulfilled. I got friends like you.
Right.
This is awesome. Well, where can listeners pick up your book, and where can they connect with you on social media?
Books are available pretty much everywhere books are sold. This is actually the book that's gotten the most foreign rights as well.
Oh, I love it.
Beforehand. So that's been a good sign. And then you can follow my work at Light Watkins on the socials and lightwatkins.com. And I've got a online community called the Happiness Insiders, which has a bunch of the 108-day movement challenge, meditation challenge. And these challenges, again, have like 80% completion rates because it's a very gradual approach to the things that people already want to do. We've got a healthy eating challenge where we talk about just introducing a little bit of protein here, eliminating a little bit of sugar there, and how to use foods as medicine. So,
hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.